Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is King. Thank you for checking out my video today. On my channel I talk about things I care about, and things I contemplate on mostly. And today I want to talk about the concept of having a child as a woman, and society's rejection of the child-free woman. And this is coming on the heels of me seeing a video some time ago. I saw it a while back. There was a lady that made this video about how the superiority complex of child-free women is misogynistic, and she framed women that wanted to have children as some sort of helpless, class of people that they just don't have any choice. The desire to have a child is innate, is inherent. And she compared it to a person being gay, and the way being gay is not a choice. And mentioning misogyny, as a critique towards the freedom. I would call it freedom. She calls it a superiority complex, but I'll call it the freedom of expression of women, and the idea of them being, not idea, but the decision to be child free. Framing it as some sort of misogyny towards women that want children. That means we're not talking about the feminist movement in general. How sometimes women can perpetrate behaviors that are misogynistic because they have internalized misogyny and they have internalized sexism. And a woman displaying misogyny and sexism is literally things that are against her own existence as a human being. But why would she be displaying such sentiment? It's because she was taught to be misogynistic. It's because she was taught and she learned sexism as part of the course of being raised in this patriarchal oppressive system societies. That's why I said you have to look at it from within the context of feminism, as in a woman speaking up about her decision to be child free. It's misogynistic towards women that want to have children. And the positioning that she placed the women that want to have children in is this helpless position where they want to have children and they know it's difficult to be a mother, because the system does not support or provide any allowances for mother. The system is even very much anti-mother. Despite forcing, let me not say forcing first, despite making laws, that do not favor motherhood, that do not equip women with so much resources to cope with the travails of being a mother, with the demands of being a mother. I don't know if I'm making sense here, but basically I take issue with that kind of sentiment. First of all, comparing it to homosexuality, and the second thing of saying it is a superiority complex, then the third thing of saying misogyny, like it is misogynistic. So let's watch the video first and then we can break it down.
Patriarchy, being a mother is very difficult. Being a mother probably on its own in any version of the world would probably be very hard, but it is definitely not be easier because of our world. But I've been thinking a lot about these videos by child-free women, and there seems to be this consensus that having a child, being a mother, being a parent is fundamentally selfish. And I think I see this notion a lot, and it's really unquestioned that, well, I'm not going to have kids because having kids is fundamentally selfish, and I'm not, I don't want to be selfish and whatever. And there's no reason to have a child that's not self-serving. And I made videos before that I'm like, this is dumb, and this just makes sense. But I think that what's happening is that when people are talking about the difficulty of having kids, sometimes I'm listening and I'm like, yeah, a lot of these is because it is just generally very difficult to be a mom. And I think we're assuming that this is kind of fundamental to motherhood and not recognizing the systemic reasons why motherhood is very difficult.
Okay, before she goes very far into, I keep saying she, I hope I'm not misgendering, the creator. Let's just say the creator. Before the creator goes ahead, the first thing that they talk about is, the first thing that they mention is that um child-free women, say things like having children is inherently selfish. Okay, and I also stand by that. Yes, like um having a child in any era of human existence has always been selfish, because there has, and I don't want to say any era, but like from the most, the era that is very present now, like from the start of this our civilization era, like civilized era, yeah, it is selfish, very selfish to have, it was selfish to have children then, because most of these children don't even are not coming into a quality of life that allows them to reach adulthood. They die few years after birth. There was no inoculation, there was no immunization, there were no vaccines, and yet they were being brought into the world. And when I say selfish, I don't think I can say honestly selfish in the means of a woman just making the calculations and still being like, I'll handle it. I think like in that era, not even I think, it's a reality. Women didn't have agency, women didn't have choices, women were more or less products. No, not products, they were more or less properties. Okay, in that era, women were properties, and their job as properties was to create value, and the only value they were presenting to the men that they were owned by was sex, domestic duties, and children, mostly children. Okay, even the poor peasant men up to the royalties, yeah, women did not have any form of agency across the board. Okay, so they were bound to have children, and even still at that, you get, you can still see the selfishness of a person, or coming to force another person to have children. And the selfishness was like the men were selfish and self-centered. Selfishness is even too gentle of a word. Okay, and then civilization now progresses up to the point of present day, where, not even present day, where um there were advances in medicine, technology, and industrialization was not kind to children. Even then, children were used as the labor force. Okay, it even became a thing, like people were literally contesting to have children working and dying in their factories because of the boom of industrialization, you get. And like all of those considerations, you see that the world has never been a safe place to bring children into. Yeah, it has never been, for the sake of progression of society, industrialization, for the sake of progression of countries. Yeah, the World War I, World War II, women were giving birth and their children were being sent off to war to die in wars, meaningless wars. um Children were being forced out of slave women, out of slave men, to continue to be ranch hands for big, like overblown plantations. So there has never been a time where children have ever had ever come to meet a kind world, a kind place in this earth, on this earth. Okay, so I don't think the idea that now when you say things like the only reason, you now call the failure of the patriarchy, which is the intentional and is for the reason of man's self-centered, selfish goals of self-actualization, you get, you now call those things fundamental. What I'm trying to say here is that yes, it is fundamental to motherhood, the difficulties, the travails, the horrors, the struggles of being a mother. It is fundamental to motherhood because the patriarchy that perpetuates these difficulties in motherhood is founded upon motherhood. Without motherhood, the patriarchy will dry out. The patriarchy will no longer have members, human beings, to continue to perpetuate itself as a system. If the system no longer has any population it controls, it will have to give way to a new system that can produce people that don't suffer as much, or I wouldn't be required to suffer as much. The absence of that population of baby makers would force a new system to come about that does not require the suffering and oppression, as much for it to continue to exist. The patriarchy is killing women through motherhood for generations on end, while still demanding for its existence the babies, the human beings that this mother are birthing. As the world has never been a safe place to bring children into, yeah, and that the powers that have always controlled the world at different points in the existence of this planet earth, that renders fundamentality to the problems of motherhood as a whole. Okay, fundamentally, motherhood does not work. The world we live in does not make um allowances for motherhood to succeed. Yeah, being a mother, it is not in alliance to the way this world operates, and therefore fundamentally motherhood is just wrong. Let me continue the video.
And then you sort of have some of these women that seem to have this superiority complex around this idea that they've chosen not to have kids, as if they. This is a horrible example, but it's almost like.
So before she goes into the gay thing, before they go into the gay part of their argument, I just want to say, I want to keep addressing the thing they spoke about. Speaking about the systemic issues of motherhood, the systemic issues that make motherhood difficult. We've lived through systems from time immemorial. We've been living, the world has never not been under different systems here, run by different systems. And all of those systems, I think, if before, maybe we don't have much information about, or me, I have not had access to information about the matriarchal societies that existed in parts of Africa, indigenous societies all over the world, how the matriarchy was the one like ruling, and the way the matriarchy was able to handle children, child rearing, upbringing, their place in the community, in the movement of and growth of their indigenous communities. I've not read much literature on it, and I feel like, as a woman that is having children, obviously you are going to make allowances for the world to be a bit kinder and more accepting of the existence of a child and this child's development, no matter the kind of child it is. But after such indigenous societies were destroyed by the pillaging, colonialism, settler, savagery of white, British men all over the world, not just white British men, but basically Europeans and their ilk, ever since then, there has not been a world that they've ever created where children have not been the largest numbers of I don't know how to say it, but like children have been the first ones to experience the brunt of the horrific systems, that these white people, white men, basically, let's just say white men, have, used to control and, hoard resources. Yeah, feudal system, using human beings as chattel, bringing people over to different countries, to their countries from their own home tribe, that's Africans, being used as slaves all over the world, and being forced to reproduce like chattel, and these children being separated from their mothers, not given a chance at, a life, dignity, integrity, humanity, even basic, so. And then when they moved from the abolishment of slavery into what, industrialization, I'm just using the America as like a sample subject here. Moving into like industrialization in America and all of that, children were the, and I spoke about child labor and all of that, yeah. All of this rents fundamentalism to the reality of motherhood not being a working way of life. You just cannot thrive as a mother. Fundamentally, motherhood does not work. Okay, and when women express, the selfishness, okay, of still processing all of these realities and deciding to add to the number of children because you think your own child will be different, you think your own family system will protect your child better, you think you're going to bring your child into a kinder world, or you're going to try to make the world good enough for your child, and then you bring this child 8 out of 10 times, it's still the same. It's just a different kind of horror they meet. It's not the kind of horror you manage to escape and go away from. It's a different kind of horror. Children that were born into the COVID era, they didn't ask for that, okay? But somehow, you see the way the disease spread and killed tons of people because of human beings, or let's just say because of the exploitative nature and selfishness of the powers that be, only regarding their own bottom line above millions and millions of citizens in the country. I'm talking about America now, yeah. The adults that died and left children behind, despite thinking when they were having those children at first that, oh, I'm going to do this for my child, I'm going to protect my child as best, and then the system takes you and leaves your child behind. And let's not even go too far. Let's not go too far. The whole Epstein thing. The men, the powerful men, the powerful white men, the rich, powerful white men from all walks of parts of the world, okay, gathering on that island, eating babies, doing research for children to be coerced into forcefully sucking something that is not their mother's breast. And when these men now go to their different areas of power and authority, they give laws like they put out laws like no more abortion. In my country, a lot of hospitals will reject women that are seeking D&Cs. In my country, women have to use primitive methods that risk the health of their uterus, the health of their reproductive system, that risk their own life, their lives, that risks just a lot of risk. They risk being arrested even, okay, if they are found, if they are caught, doing illegal abortions because they have no proper healthcare for healthcare provisions for the wish to carry out abortions. And even the countries that have abortion centers are being hounded every day by religious fanatics and bigots trying to shame them into closing down the entire hospitals. Planned Parenthood. Here it is shame for any woman that has an abortion or has a history of having had an abortion. You get? And it's like, what world are you forcing women to bring these children into? And at the end of the day, you see that there is a force at large, making women feel like they have to have children, you get. And so you cannot now come and sit in the angle of helplessness and act as if, or express opinions that suggest that having children is some kind of inherent act of bad, like an act of, like an innate aspect of being a woman, you get. So now we'll go on to the gay whatever that this person was trying to argue about.
A gay person being like, well, it's too difficult to be gay in this world, so I'm just going to like be straight. I'm just going to marry the opposite sex or whatever, and then having the superiority complex over people who are gay and live their life as a gay person. Walk with me here, I promise. And it's like what I'm fundamentally saying is like we're all suffering under this system, and some people are like excusing themselves from the system and then looking at people who are still inside of it and saying like you're like flawed for some reason for staying within it, when no one's talking about like the whole system. All of us are functioning under it. Being a mother is difficult for systemic reasons. Deciding to not have kids does not mean that the people who don't, specifically women, the mothers who do decide to become mothers, or the women who decide to become mothers, it does not mean that they made an immoral choice. Because fundamentally, the decision to become a mom is not immoral, it's amoral. Because what like makes it difficult isn't the choice itself. It's not the state of being a mother itself. It's patriarchy. Do you hear me?
So the whole thing about being gay, like I think I what I got from this video is basically a thinking that suggests that a lot of people just innately want to have children, and even gay men have children, trans women can decide to have children and all of that. But I feel like this person is speaking more about surrogacy and just the birthing process of having a children. I don't think they are speaking about adoption, which in my it doesn't apply. Okay, if you want to be child free, like my own argument about how the world has never been kind to children and then decide to bring a child to the world, no, deciding to adopt a child is not the same as deciding to bring a child into the world. So I don't think this person was talking about adoption. I feel like this person was making reference to just the idea that a lot of people just instinctually want to have children, and then now rounding it up as, oh, nobody's talking about the patriarchal systems that makes it difficult for people to be mothers, and it's like most child-free women start their discourse and start their decision-making process of not wanting to be child-free. They start it from a deep understanding of the horror of the patriarchal system that we exist in. Okay, so you can't say child-free women don't start from there. That's literally, I feel personally, that's literally most of their starting point. This person said child-free women are people that have excused themselves from the system, and then they turn around and look at people that are still in the system, and kind of mock them for being in the system. And it's like, as much as we want to give grace, as much as you expect grace, for your choices, that you, I wouldn't call it choices, to be honest, because if you grew up as a girl child, okay, this person is making the assumptions that the person that is still, the people that are still in the system, that the ones that want children, they have no choice but to be there, or yeah, they have no choice but to be there. But how can you say they have no choice but to be there, but that argument falls flat when there are people that are literally choosing not to be there? You get, the existence of people that can excuse themselves from the system shows that all of us can actually excuse ourselves from the system. We can excuse ourselves from the system until the system changes, because there is no more fuel keeping it alive. There is no more harbinger of the old ways keeping it alive. This whole patriarchal system is as old as several generations. Yeah, it's not the oldest thing in the world because plenty systems have existed before it. Yeah, but this patriarchal system is being kept alive by people that continue to play along. If people can decide to excuse themselves from the system, you can now frame yourself as helpless to the system, because if you search deep and hard enough, you can also find a way to excuse yourself from the system. That's why adoption is not the same thing as bringing a child to the world. You can find a way to excuse yourself from the systems. But again, the whole idea that just because people look back at you in the system and kind of make a mockery of you, you get, and it comes off as misogynistic. I think that is not misogyny as much as just, you know, calling you out to see that you have more agency than you give yourself credit for. The reality that you've bought into, that you need to have a child. What if you don't have a child and you find out that that need was just an implantation of this same patriarchal system? You understand that, like, there's no girl child that exists, that is born into this world every minute, that is not immediately, when they come into points of consciousness, thought, even before they are even sentient, they are taught and they are passively conditioned to expect their future selves to be mothers. Okay. And because it is coming from such a young age, where there is no agency to say no, let me discern this information, let me discern this conditioning I'm accepting, I'm receiving, and let me kind of say no to it. Have you considered a world where the patriarchy does not exist? Like, the women that will be in those worlds, do you think all of those women would want to be children in the same numbers that we have now within the patriarchy? So you cannot recognize the agency of people that want to be mothers saying no, I don't want to be mothers, and they excuse themselves from the system, and then now put yourself in this shoe of, oh, it's just innate to me that I just want a child. No, maybe my take is controversial, but I feel like there is nobody that is born with the desire to have children. There's nobody that truly has any innate desire to be mothers or parents. We're talking about women now, so let's just say mothers. I don't feel like anybody's born with that. I feel like as long as somebody can wake up one day and, unlearn that desire and dig deep and see that that desire is not coming from themselves. Who says your own desire is now real? Like, you get that kind of thing. But then again, if you talk about sexuality, say some people are born gay and some people are not born gay. So I guess in that sense of the argument, like you're making a. But then again, you can't use the sexuality angle for it, because a lot of women that want to have children, they might end up being infertile. Circumstances of life will not happen and they don't have children, and it's like, do you stop existing because you don't have a child? Does it really stop your life when you don't have a child? Aside from the mental anguish of unlearning a deep-seated conditioning that has been implanted in you by this system we all are born into. The patriarchy, there's no system, I think, that conditions people. The only condition of sexuality that we even see that is being done, and first on us all, is being heterosexuals. Everybody as a child is taught to be compulsorily heteronormative, okay? And so instead of even using gay, you get the idea of motherhood. To me, the idea of motherhood feels like comfort. It's not even about people not being gay, or people being gay and deciding not to be gay and then marrying a woman. Those kind of people exist. Do you understand? Those kind of people exist. But to me, in this situation, the analogy I would use is the people that are raised as compulsorily heteronormative, heterosexuals, yeah, and they go their whole lives and they never allow themselves, or they never question their sexuality, because that's just what they've been taught. That is the analogy that applies to motherhood. That's the analogy that applies to motherhood. And I feel like rendering criticism of women that continue to make a choice, to make a choice in patriarchy's favor, is not misogyny. We just have to hold our feet to the fire. we have to hold our feet to the fire. Why do you want to have a child? You really need to go to the end of that question. And a lot of people don't want to go to the end of the question because they like it, and then they like it because it has become a part of their identity. When they were forming their sense of self, that is where the whole seed of having a child as a woman, as a girl, you know, is placed into. So they cannot separate it. Some people cannot separate it from their identity, and that's when you now start entering theft levels, theft territory. But basically, this video has gone on long, and I feel like I'm going around in circles. But my own idea is like, consider women that experience postpartum depression after childbirth. Women, they are all over the internet now. There's a whole account on TikTok that women mostly, just sending mails and stories of how much they regret having children. Regret implies the presence of two roads. Okay, it implies the presence of two choices they could have made, and they made a choice towards one other one, and now they regret not choosing the other choice. I don't know if that makes sense. You get, a lot of parents regret, especially mother. That woman came on here and she was crying, and she was like, she loved her daughter when she was growing up. She wanted the whole 9 yards. She even had a daughter. You get, it's not as if she had a son, she had a daughter. According to how she dreamed since she was a child, she was so convinced that she wanted to have a child, and she was very ready for it. And then the child came, and she can't muster feelings, and she came on TikTok to say it. And there are a lot of people bashing her. Basically, they were like, we understand how you feel, but at the end of the day, don't put it online. So your daughter will say, well, I was of the opinion of her putting it online. Let her put it on TikTok. Let her daughter grow to see it, and realize that you don't have to have children. Okay, you don't have to have children. This woman cannot muster up affection for her child because she regrets having a child. This is someone that grew up wanting children. Then the other postpartum, patients as well, mothers, that also talk about motherhood not being anything that they expected, despite them having full-on support of their husbands, their family, their neighbors, the government, everything. They have money, they have everything, and they still don't want to connect with their child. It is not inherent to your identity as a person that identifies as a woman to have children. And critiquing the women that keep on perpetuating their ideologies of course I'm just going to have children, even seeing the reality that we live in, that a lot of the things we associate with being a woman are just patriarchal conditioning. How are you so sure that your desire to have a child is not also patriarchal conditioning? Have you questioned it? And like I was saying, questioning women that continue to make it a matter of course to have children is not misogyny. It's not. The world we live in, you cannot keep having children to go and work in somebody's Amazon factory. What world are you bringing them into? And nobody is saying that it is immoral or ethically wrong. There are some schools of thought that believe in antinatalism. That's against having children. There's a whole philosophy backing their belief and all of that. That's not where I'm coming from, because I feel like there's no, if you start to attach morality to the choice of children, you just to me. So I think I need to do more research on natalism and antinatalism. But at the end of the day, you understand, at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is that child-free women are not calling it immoral per se. That's what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm getting from the whole conversation is just the discomfort of realizing that you can choose differently. Okay, and it's like you are scared that if you choose differently, you might actually appreciate it. But for whatever reason that is best known to you as individuals, you don't want to choose differently. That's the conversation here. So you can't just position yourself as helpless, when we are seeing real life examples of people that can actually just walk away from it all, decide not to have children. the fundamentals of it is that motherhood is just because your child ends up being a laborer for the system to perpetuate itself for next generation. It has to be, you have to fall in line for the stability of society. You have to believe that it is innate for you to have children. You just have to believe it. That's the problem here. That's why you feel so much discomfort. It's not misogynistic, my dear. It is not. You are not helpless. You can stand in your truth and be like, you know what, I want to have children. But looking for loopholes to kind of stop people from calling the decision to continue having children, that's not feminist at all. And you can't now use misogyny as a gotcha for feminists, like to silence them. You will be criticized for having children in such a system. You should be criticized. There's nothing anti-feminist about that. You should rethink it. So many years back, it was just normal to just marry. Now we have women that choose not to marry. And before we got to the normalization of seeing women not being married, there was a lot of conversation. There was a lot of criticism from society on such women that made such decisions. Endless. And the other men are like, wait though, I can decide not to marry. And the women started, accepting their sexualities too. A lot of women think all our great grandmothers were straight women. No. But there was no, I won't say there was no, but because they experienced their own feminist movement regardless, yeah. But that kind of conversation was seen as very outlier sort of conversations. I don't know if what I said makes sense, but it's all conditioning by the systems they exist in. You need to feel as if it is fundamental and innate for you to have children so that the system can keep on existing. If every woman or every person that identifies as a woman decides to not have children through surrogacy, IVF, or traditional birth, what will happen to the world? It will die out. It will die out. It will starve. It will starve. And then what? We can now start to rebuild a whole new system, or whatever generation is alive, they can start to rebuild a whole new system for themselves. One where they realize that they don't need to have children. Those are the kind of conversations and areas we should be breaking with our critiques of ourselves and the choices we make as women, and also to advance the movement of feminism. Not trying to avoid discomfort for your choices.